It's the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David talks to author and podcaster Mike McHargue, aka Science Mike. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home, and I would normally say our studio audience to the weekly show. I am your host, David J. Maloney. I say normally because we'd usually shoot the show before a small studio audience at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, but we are still shooting from home due to coronavirus concerns. And because we are still shooting from home, filling in for our house band, the Mogiles, again with me tonight is my son, Gianni. This past week, President Biden had lunch with Vice President Harris in the White House dining room. After lunch, Kamala thanked Joe again for picking her as his running mate. Joe then thanked Kamala for cutting his meat. CNN has reported that Joe Biden has not played golf since becoming president. He doesn't really feel the urge, though, because his border policy is already the U.S. Open. And Marriott Hotel CEO Arne Sorensen has passed away at the age of just 62. He could have lived longer, but he failed to request a late checkout. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is set to receive the 2020 International Emmy Founders Award. Yeah, it'll be the first time ever somebody won an Emmy for killing Grammy. According to a new study, 81% of online daters lie on dating websites. Researchers say they were very surprised at how many people actually hate long walks on the beach. Oh, and a belated happy birthday to John Travolta. The actor has been continually dogged by gay rumors, but I don't believe he's gay. I mean, I can tell by the way he uses his walk. He's a woman's man. No time to talk. Lastly, America's most expensive hotel suite now is at the Palms Casino in Las Vegas. It's $100,000 a night, plus $995 a day if you want Wi-Fi. We have a very special guest on tonight's show and an interview you won't want to miss. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. G? And we are back. Our featured guest tonight is a friend of the show and one of the more popular scientists and psychologists around. He's been quite busy since the last time he was on. His book, You're a Miracle and a Pain in the Ass, dropped last year and was a profound and wonderful read. He was just recently used as a science consultant for the hit Marvel show WandaVision, and he's now got a new show called The Cozy Robot Show that's headed for an incredible year. Here to talk about all things science and his new show is the man known as Science Mike. Please give a warm welcome to Mike McHargue. Mike, welcome back to the show.
David, so good to be back. Thanks for the call. I always love being here. And I love that jacket too, by the way.
Thank you. It was actually a Christmas gift from the missus. So
nice.
I thought it was actually more Easter-like. So if we are able to actually go somewhere for Easter. If not, I'll probably be wearing it for Easter dinner at home. But it has that Easter feel about it. So a lot has happened since we last spoke. In fact, you were one of the first interviews or guests we had at the start of the pandemic last February. A year on now, how are you holding up?
Oh, gosh, you kind of just learn to exist in this Groundhog Day-esque holding pattern of every day is the same, every day you're at home. We've been really, really strict about not seeing other people. So, I've probably gathered in a backyard 6 times with other people since we last spoke when case numbers were low. And other than that, it's just been me and my family at home all the time. And with that headwind, I'm doing pretty well, learning to, try to work on myself and work on our family dynamics and still try to do work that is meaningful and makes a public impact, all while staying home all the time.
So since the last time you came on, I've seen your videos with Rhett and Link. and was kind of shocked when you popped up on their channel. I had no idea. You guys seem to be really good friends. What's the story there? How'd you all meet?
Oh gosh, we were thinking about making a move to Los Angeles, Jenny and I, my wife, and we came out for kind of an extended vacation with the family to try and see if this would be a fit or not. And we come from the rural South, and so LA would be a big transition. And we met through some mutual friends and had dinner over at their house. We didn't know anything about Rhett and Link as a brand. It's just my wife heard other people with Southern accents in Los Angeles and just hit it off immediately. So we ended up moving to LA, and they became just really close friends. Just people we have just lived in and been around and done things together with. And I then discovered that they are this delightful comedy duo, and I got to know their vast library of public work after I got to know them as friends, and I'm glad it worked that way. Otherwise, I would have been too intimidated to act normal around them. They are so talented, and truly delightful people.
So you're one of the only popular scientists we've been able to have on the show to talk about the pandemic. And we value your honesty and approach immensely. So it's a year on in now. In your opinion, how good a job do you think we've done in this country of handling this virus?
We did really badly. At every level. We did badly at a government response at the federal, state, and local levels. We did poorly in the response of the business community. When we did poorly in the aggregate of our personal behaviors, and our staggering number of cases, death, and hospitalizations kind of bear that mark. I think we owe our healthcare workers some mental health care for the next decade as they get over the trauma of what it was like to deal with such intense numbers of hospitalizations. So I can't really mix words and say America gets high marks in many ways, and especially when it was so clear from a scientific perspective what better alternatives were. We were making people choose between housing and income and responsible behaviors, and then people were fatigued. They had to work to kind of secure their basic necessities. Businesses had to stay open to avoid defaulting on their ongoing expenses. And the total lack of a coordinated government response meant that people were forced into difficult situations. And then, because they felt hopeless, a lot of people were like, well, I have to be at work all day. I have to be out. I have to be about. I'm not going to just work and not see friends and family. And so you saw this intensifying pandemic fatigue where our half mitigations were more exhausting than doing nothing or doing the right thing. And we saw that especially in the Thanksgiving to New Year's period when people just kind of gave up and they said, nope, we're doing Thanksgiving, we're doing Christmas, we're doing New Year's holidays. And then we saw that massive surge. Right. So that we've gone through a really frightening time, and things really are getting better. I think the staggering death counts we saw at that, we're seeing better personal compliance. Of course, vaccination. America is going from kind of the worst in the world in responding to COVID-19 to among the best. Our vaccination rates are exceptional. And so we're kind of getting whiplash right now where we've gone from will this ever get better to we might have a new normal in just a few months. It's a really big turn.
Is there a country out there you think enacted the right preventative measures to stem the virus?
Sure. There's lots of countries that did really well. South Korea was notable for an exceptional COVID response. Although late starters, Japan made up a lot of ground. New Zealand and Australia did really well. What you saw in those countries was, number one, they took the virus seriously immediately and did total lockdowns. Number two, they understood that societies can't function without economies, and so government stepped in and did massive stimulus spending to keep economies alive as they were shut down. Three, because people felt supported. People were compliant with the lockdown measures. And four, because they did steep lockdowns, They were able to drop cases fast enough that they had less total time in isolation, so it was more bearable. So in a lot of the countries that did things well, they're having music festivals now. They have concerts, movie theaters are open, shopping malls are open. And when like a COVID case happens, they lock down hard again for 2 weeks because they've looked at the rest of the world and gone, you know what? A 2-week total lockdown is a lot better than a year and a half partial lockdown with economic calamity and severe mental health consequences.
It's like what they call a death of 1,000 cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, flu numbers are down significantly. Is that because the same precautions we're now using to curb COVID, the much more infectious coronavirus, are also minimizing the spread of the flu?
Yeah, well, the big takeaway here is that physical distancing and masking are incredible disease control mechanisms. It really grieves me that masks have become such an intense point of political polarization because who the heck wants cold and flu season to be so severe? They're very inexpensive. They're not very intrusive in our lives. And myself and a lot of scientists and epidemiologists would love to see masking be a regular seasonal thing because it protects lives and protects quality of life.
It's almost as if the wearing of a mask became a scarlet letter of sorts.
It feels like if we would have had a political fight about whether umbrellas were a political statement during a rainy season. Like, no, umbrellas are just a simple, common sense way to stay dry in the rain.
Makes sense. And I hadn't thought of it that way, but that is very true. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to commercial break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to talk to you about your upcoming projects, a little bit more about the virus and the pandemic, and we'll be right back after this break with Science Mike McHargue. And we are back with Science Mike McHargue. So Mike, a lot of people are still kind of skeptical about the origins of the coronavirus. China just recently let outside observers into Wuhan. What do you know what the envoy's findings were? I mean, I know that. Do you think we have an answer now, or is there still real doubt amongst the scientific community about patient zero?
Oh, there's lots of doubt in terms of where the virus came from precisely. There's two leading thoughts in the scientific community. Number one is that species-to-species transfer, which is a common and a well-known path that pandemics happen in human society. It's the intersection of dense urban populations, agriculture, and habitat intrusion that creates pandemics in the first place, right? Early societies didn't have pandemics. It required a certain level of agricultural integration with large populations of people. The other kind of hypothesis, which is, I think, gaining steam, not just among like conspiracy theorists, but among actual scientists and epidemiologists, is that there was some kind of a laboratory leakage where, a virus that was being tested or researched, perhaps in search for, more broadly effective vaccines. You create a virus that's hard to that spreads readily and then try to create vaccinations for it in a lab setting, may have gotten out of a laboratory environment. We do know that there are different levels of viral research that happen in industrialized countries. And so there are some questions about whether perhaps COVID-19 might have been a research virus, not a weapon, not a bioweapon, but a research virus that made it out of a laboratory.
Switching studies a bit, from a psychological perspective, what do you think we've learned about our species and communities coming out of the pandemic?
We've learned we are social mammals. When we have social isolation, that triples your risk for anxiety disorder and depression. And that risk persists for 9 years after the isolation ends.
Wow.
And so we learned that people don't weather isolation well. And we also learned that leadership matters. The fact that we weren't able to get cohesive recommendations and good behavioral modeling, not just in the U.S. government, but from governments and leaders all over the world, meant that most cultures failed to organize into a collective response. Basically, most cultures that have a more individualistic focus in general handled the pandemic more poorly. Now, there are exceptions, of course. Australia and New Zealand did really well.
Is there a current feeling in the scientific community that COVID-19 is something that's here for the long haul, kind of like the flu?
Yeah, COVID-19 is going to be around. We expect we'll have an annual COVID season, probably. The kind of vaccine infrastructure we've built out will need to be maintained and continue. It's likely that COVID immunity from the vaccines will, last months to a year. It won't last years. So we're going to be looking at annual or even biannual COVID boosters. Our goal here is to keep enough people vaccinated to avoid the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 specifically, from mutating at such a rate that it lowers efficacy and becomes more contagious and more deadly. Again, we've got more work to do in terms of childhood vaccination. So yeah, this is going to be a multi-year effort. But that said, we don't expect the kind of extended crushing waves that we've had in the past. And that's basically going to come down to the availability of vaccines and new vaccine formulations. The vaccines we have, by the way, are really, really good.
But also the people willing to take them. I mean, let's talk vaccines. I mean, I know we're going to have watchers and listeners who are skeptical of the science behind the vaccines. If you had to explain these vaccines to a skeptic and why they should take the vaccine, how would you do that?
Vaccines, other than maybe hand washing, are the most effective medical technology ever created in terms of saving lives. We don't have anything in the world of medicine that has so effectively mitigated disease and suffering as vaccines have. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories around vaccines, and I understand that. And we've seen what happens when conspiracy theories convince people to not get vaccinations. People get sick and die. I live in Los Angeles, where measles and mumps and whooping cough and all kinds of old diseases have started to make a comeback because of people who buy into this anti-vaccine stuff. And the outcome from that is adults and children get sick and they die. So the technology is really simple. Well, it's not really simple, but it's really well understood. We take pieces of viruses, not whole viruses, pieces of viruses that can't replicate inside your body, and we put it into your body's tissues so your immune system can see it, recognize it, and then create an antibody response so that when an actual virus like SARS-CoV-2 that causes the coronavirus we call COVID-19 enters your body, your immune system is already primed what we call an adaptive immune system response. It has created special chemicals that attack that particular virus. These vaccines have been through the full normal multi-phase trials that show us not only efficacy but safety. And none of that was skipped. The way we got these viruses on the market so quickly was not by skipping safety steps, but by resourcing researchers with nearly unlimited budgets. And they're safe, they're effective, they work, and it's the only way we're going to get back to any kind of normal life again. And let's be real here. We've been through a fortunate period where we've had relatively few pandemics when compared to the amount of population growth we found on this planet. You should expect in the coming years more pandemics and potentially more severe pandemics. COVID-19 has been a great rehearsal for a pandemic that is more infectious and more deadly. And the only way we're going to be able to mitigate those things is the rapid production and distribution of vaccines.
Do we have reasons to worry about the long-term effects of the vaccine? I mean, I see people talking about damaging chemicals and vaccines and concerns with preservatives, like people had concerns with the MMR. What do you say to them?
Well, number one, the concern we'd have with any preservative is less than the concern we'd have with the disease in question. That's why we create vaccines, because diseases are deadly. But number two, let's talk about how chemistry works. Let's think about two chemicals that are incredibly dangerous, sodium and chlorine. Sodium is so volatile that if it contacts water, it explodes with incredible energy. And chlorine, as you know, is an incredible antibiotic to kill basically any cell we know of on contact. These two incredibly volatile chemicals, when combined together, make table salt, right? We eat table salt all the time. It might cause hypertension if you have too much of it, but in general, it's a natural food preservative that's really effective, even though it's made of two terrifyingly dangerous chemicals. So molecules and chemical compounds can't be cleanly reduced to the elements that are in them. So if you hear that there's aluminum or mercury or something like that in a preservative, you're not talking about atomic or elemental mercury or aluminum. You're talking about something that is existing in a chemical chain that is not bioactive. They can't put something in a vaccine that's going to stay in your body for a long time or be fat soluble or do any of these kind of things that would be cause for concern. So no, we don't have concerns that there's some kind of long-term health consequence from this or any vaccine. That's never shown up in the data.
Let's talk about the Cozy Robot Show. I think you were just launching it at the time we last spoke. Tell us a little bit more about the show and what it's about.
The show is about empathetic skepticism. So we have two problems in our society that kind of blend together. Number one is we've lost our ability to understand our feelings or the feelings of other people. And that means when we talk about important matters, the conversations break down as people try to manage their reputations and emotional responses. And two is skepticism. We have falling levels of media literacy and information literacy and critical thinking skills. And so we've created a show that's interactive and participatory that helps people explore those ideas.
What kind of subjects can we expect to hear you talking about on the show?
Gosh, we pick all kinds of topics that our audience comes up with. So the people who watch the show decide what we're going to talk about together. We've talked about vaccines. We've talked about disease pathways. We've talked about grief. We've talked about relationship issues. We kind of talk about whatever people are interested in.
It seems like you've really created a unique online community where everyone can feel loved, accepted, and heard through your content. Was that kind of the goal, to allow a space for honest discussion and community around some really, really important issues?
It is. We kind of looked at Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Bill Nye the Science Guy and wanted to put those in a blender and make a show for adults with those elements.
I've learned you've also recently been a science consultant for Marvel Studios. What does that mean? How did that come about? And are you now suddenly the coolest dad ever, or what?
Well, I can't say a lot because you sign a big NDA when you do any work with Disney. But I helped work through the scientific implications of the ideas in a lot of the projects in Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And to the second point, yeah, my kids thought it was really cool.
Where can our audience go to follow the Cozy Robot Show?
CozyRobots.com will take you right there, and you can watch live Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at CozyRobots.com/watch.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike, for being on the show again. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike the Science Guy, Mike McHargue.
Thanks, David.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Taking us home tonight, still filling in for our house band, the Mogiles, my son, Gianni.